Ladies and gentlemen, they say empires fall by the sword, yet sometimes they decay inside the bedchamber. In 38 C, at the very height of Roman power, a young bride crossed the marble thresholds of the Palatine Palace. Her name was Valyria Messalina, only 15, selected to marry Emperor Claudius, a man more than twice her age, frail in body, yet laden with imperial authority. To the Roman public, this marriage sounded like a promise. A fertile empress of noble blood, a girl meant to embody virtue, bear heirs, and steady a dynasty still haunted by Caligula's madness. Beneath the garlands of that wedding day, another tale had already begun to move, the one that would carve her name into memory as the most depraved empress in Rome. At first glance, Messalina appeared every inch the ideal consort. Ancient chroniclers describe a beauty Rome adored. Pale skin, golden hair, and the fine aristocratic features that set her apart from ordinary women of the city. She met her early duties without fault, giving Claudius 2 children, and appearing at state rites with grace and restraint. Under the rigid moral code of Roman life, where women were divided into the matrona, the virtuous wife, and the meretrix, the prostitute, she was expected to incarnate chastity. What if the very gulf between what Rome demanded from her and what she secretly desired became the engine of her ruin? Did you know many claimed that Messalina slipped out of the palace at night, disguised as a prostitute working in a brothel in the Sabura district? Tacitus relates that she pitted herself against Rome's lowest courtesans, determined to prove she could take more clients than any of them. Picture the shock of a senator stumbling into such a den only to recognize the empress beneath grease paint and cheap perfume. It was not desperation that drove her. It was the thrill, the rebellion, and a compulsive urge to weaponize her sexuality against the society that idolized her purity. The brothel escapades were only the starting point. Inside the palace, she turned the court of Claudius into a theater of obscenity. Picture the banquets, couches draped in silk, golden platters piled with roasted dormice, and figs heavy with honey, wine spilling from jeweled cups. Senators reclined in anxious silence, while Messalina presided not as a dignified hostess, but as a master of ceremonies, summoning gladiators fresh from the arena, captives from distant provinces, even noble sons and daughters to amuse her with humiliating amusements. One whispered report claimed she once arranged a contest between herself and Rome's most famous prostitute, Sila, betting that she could outlast the professional in sheer endurance. At dawn, Sila collapsed after serving 25 men. Messalina continued, exceeding 30. Her victory greeted not with applause, but with horrified quiet. Why did she do it? Was it desire without limit or something colder? A calculated way to control the empire's elite through shame. Her targets stretched across every rank. Generals coerced into submission. Aristocratic women blackmailed into degrading acts. The sons of senators dragged into her spectacles. Refusal was nearly impossible. Those who spurned her advances often met sudden ends. A tribune found floating in the Tiber, a noble stripped of office overnight. The message was unmistakable. Rome's empress did not accept denial, even Philhon. She staged ceremonies in mockery of Venus and Bacchus, first draping herself in priestly robes, then tearing them away, ordering participants to enact obscene rites in the name of the gods. For Rome, religion was the glue of empire, binding citizen to citizen and city to city. By corrupting it, she implied that she alone was the true deity in the palace, goddess not of love, but of domination. Imagine the emotional wreckage inside Roman homes. A senator's wife, humiliated in public, returning in silence. A daughter torn from her father's villa, reappearing days later with eyes that would not meet his. Claudius himself, often painted as weak or simple, seemed unable or unwilling to stop her. Was he blind to her excesses or complicit by silence? Historians still argue, yet the result is plain. Messalina's name spread across the empire, not as a symbol of fertility and dignity, but as a curse. Even so, the empire carried on with its empress. Markets buzzed, legions marched, chariots roared in the circus Maximus. Rome's bright facade remained, while its moral core withered behind closed doors. Every whisper about Messalina scraped at the Senate's authority. Every scandal weakened faith in the emperor's house. Rome, once proud of discipline and virtue, watched its highest lady turn debauchery into a tool of policy. The ruins on the Palatine still stand. Their fresco are faded, their columns cracked. Yet beneath the dust of centuries, her shadow lingers. The girl bride, who became the most feared courtesan of her time. Her story poses a question that chills across ages. What happens when the one chosen to embody virtue crowns herself with vice? Power in Rome was never only written in statutes or carved in marble. It was breathed in bedrooms, bargained over at feasts, and in Messalina's case, wielded through the body of an empress. As the years of her rule unfolded, her appetites did not diminish. They grew bolder, more deliberate, and far more dangerous. What began as secret midnight adventures evolved into a machine of corruption that tangled Rome's most powerful men and women in a net of humiliation. Tacitus, Suetonius, and Juvenal, each with his own venom, chronicled the descent. They report that Messalina established what could only be called an imperial brothel, hidden in plain sight, within a lavish villa near the campus marshes. This was not a house for common lust. It was an operation shaped with ruthless intelligence. Aristocratic women, coerced under threat of ruin, were forced to serve at her side. Senators, generals, and merchants arrived under false pretenses, only to find themselves compromised in ways that guaranteed their silence. Every whispered confession, every trembling secret born in the heat of shame, was recorded by her loyal attendants. Later accounts claim she used that knowledge to blackmail entire families, securing wealth, governorships, and obedience without raising a single legion. The small scenes of her reign are chilling. Picture a young noblewoman dragged from her father's atrium and forced to act the courtesan under Messalina's watchful eye. Imagine senators stripped of their togas, compelled into degrading displays before rivals who would later exploit their disgrace. One soldier who escaped the villa said the experience was worse than battle, admitting blood dries, shame never does. This was Messalina's cruel brilliance. She learned that sexual humiliation could break men more completely than the sword. Her cruelty marched with spectacle. By the early 42nd C, her gatherings were notorious. Disguised as festivals for Venus or Bacchus, they began solemn incense climbing toward the gods, then slid into staged orgies where the ruling class performed acts they would never dare confess. Messalina conducted the entire scene like a maestro. Senators were paired with enemies. Generals were forced into grotesque contests. Noble wives were unveiled before roaring circles of the elite. Refusal meant disaster. Compliance meant ruin. Everyone left bound not by loyalty, but by shared and suffocating shame. The most disturbing account focused less on public display and more on her need to compete. She treated sex as a gladiator's sport. Her most infamous contest, the endurance match against Scylla, Rome's celebrated prostitute, shocked the capital. Before a select audience of nobles, Scylla paced herself with care, tending to 25 men through the long night until exhaustion took her. Messalina did not stop. She continued past 30, refusing to yield until no volunteers remained. By dawn, she had won, and with that victory shattered any illusion of Roman dignity. The Empress of Rome, wife to Claudius, had turned herself into a spectacle, reigning in degradation, not as disgrace, but as triumph. Why would a woman raised in privilege, adored for beauty, and crowned as empress, embrace degradation as her highest pleasure? Historians search for answers. Some argue insatiable lust. Others point to a hunger for power. Some see the trauma of being married so young to an older, awkward husband. Perhaps the truth is simpler and more chilling. For Messalina, the contrast was intoxicating. The more her public role demanded chastity, the more thrilling it became to betray it. Her empire of lust had consequences. The Senate, already weakened, found itself frozen by blackmail. Governors were chosen not for ability, but for silence. Generals stood loyal, not through honor, but through fear of exposure. Rome's policies twisted under her unseen hand. Foreign envoys whispered of strange negotiations where senators seemed subdued, distracted, almost broken. The empire's leadership was being consumed by one woman's fixation. Decadence breeds enemies. The soldiers, long tolerant of imperial excess, began to mutter. Loyalty frayed when rumors spread that their comrades had been summoned to Messalina's villa and stripped of dignity before her guests. For men hardened by war, humiliation was worse than death. The barracks rang with whispers and curses that elsewhere would have meant treason. Her paranoia swelled, guards tightened, punishments grew harsher, the spectacles turned crueler, as if doubling the shame could strangle rebellion. Each act cut new cracks into the fragile facade of her dominion of desire. Rome had survived fire, plague, and invasion. Could it survive an empress who ruled through degradation? The breaking point arrived in 48 CE with an act so bold it still staggers historians. While Claudius was away in Ostia, Messalina staged a wedding, not a secret tiara, wrist, or a private oath, but a full Roman marriage to her lover, the senator Scandalous. Priests attended, witnesses signed, contracts were sealed. Every ritual Rome required stood in place to legitimize the union. By law, she was now married to Caius while still holding the title of empress and wife of Claudius. This was not mere scandal. It was open revolt. She stepped out of shadow into daylight. Her lust transformed into treason. What could have driven her to such madness? Did she believe Claudius would submit, that the Senate would yield, that Rome would accept 2 husbands for its empress? Or was it compulsion, the need to escalate until destruction was certain? Whatever the motive, the act proved fatal. Loyal freedmen ran to inform Claudius. At first he laughed. Sure, it was a wild rumor. As proof accumulated, laughter turned to anger. The emperor mocked and cuckolded, finally moved. Claudius returned to Rome with soldiers at his back. Messalina was found in the gardens of the palace. She had ruled like a goddess of vice. Ancient writers describe her last moments with cold clarity. She begged and pleaded, offered her children as hostages. When mercy did not come, she tried to take her own life, then faltered. A soldier thrust the blade home. The empress who had enslaved Rome through shame died not in grandeur, but in panic and blood. Her punishment did not stop at death. Claudius ordered her statues thrown down, her name erased, her memory condemned to oblivion. Damnio memorial, yet Rome never forgot. The more they tried to bury her, the louder her legend grew. Stand in the Palatine ruins today, and the silence feels heavy. Visitors may admire the mosaics, yet the stones murmur of something darker. The brothel, the rebels, the blackmail, the forbidden marriage. Messalina's tale endures not because Rome wished it told, but because it could not be silenced. In the end, her legacy is a warning carved across centuries. Empires do not fall only to invasion. They can collapse from corruption that ferments within their own walls. She proved that lust can be as destructive as steel. She showed that shame can bind men more tightly than chains. History closes her chapter with a truth as brutal as her life. Rome's most dangerous weapon was not the sword. Thank you for watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Did you like my story or not? Please tell me in the comments.